Okay, so I'm going to tell you something that nobody knows the real story about. And honestly, I don't even care anymore what people think. I'm Delilah. I'm 27, and the whole thing started when I was this invisible fat girl who thought she'd won the lottery when Eric proposed to me. Looking back now, I should have seen all the red flags, but whatever. Here we are. So, Eric and I had been together for 9 freaking years when he finally got around to proposing. 9 years of him seeing me at my absolute worst. We're talking 100-pound overweight, wearing the same three oversized hoodies, ordering takeout every night because I was too depressed to cook. I was basically a couch potato with legs, and Eric acted like that was perfectly fine. He'd sit there next to me, equally gross, eating pizza and playing video games, like we were some old married couple already. The proposal itself should have been my first clue that this guy had zero ambition. It wasn't romantic or special, just a random Tuesday night in our messy apartment with leftover Chinese food containers everywhere. He got down on one knee right there on our stained carpet and pulled out this tiny ring that probably cost him like 2 months' salary from his basic office job, said he loved me exactly as I was, and wanted to spend forever with me. At the time, I thought it was sweet, but now I realize he was probably just relieved that someone like me said yes. Like, he figured he'd better lock it down before I realized I could do better. The minute I said yes, something clicked in my brain. I was going to be a bride, and there was no way in hell I was going to be one of those brides who looks back at their wedding photos with regret. I told Eric we needed to wait to set a date until I reached my goal weight. He looked confused and kept saying I was beautiful already, and we didn't need to wait. But honestly, that just proved he didn't get it. Of course, he thought I looked fine. He'd never been with anyone better looking than me at my worst. I started my weight loss journey the very next week, and Eric was supportive in that annoying way guys are when they don't actually understand what you're going through. He'd offer to work out with me, but then suggest we order pizza afterward. He'd buy me protein bars, but then get hurt when I wouldn't split a dessert with him. It was like he wanted me to succeed, but also wanted to keep me exactly where I was because that version of me was safe for him. The weight started coming off faster than I expected, and with every pound I lost, I noticed things changing. Not just my body, but how people treated me. Suddenly, cashiers would smile at me instead of looking right through me. Guys would hold doors open and make eye contact. Women would actually include me in conversations instead of acting like I didn't exist. Eric kept saying how proud he was, but I could tell he was getting nervous. He'd make these little comments about how I was changing and how he hoped I'd remember the little people when I was skinny. It was supposed to be a joke, but there was something desperate underneath it that honestly annoyed me. By month 8, I'd lost 80 pounds and started getting real attention from men. Not just polite attention, actual interest. The guy at the coffee shop started drawing little hearts in my foam. This coworker started finding reasons to stop by my desk. Even Eric's friend Tyler made a comment about how lucky Eric was getting. I started wondering if Eric really was lucky or if maybe I was the one settling now. Once I hit my goal weight, 100 pounds down, I felt like a completely different person. I looked in the mirror and saw someone who could have options, real options. Eric threw me this little celebration dinner at home, just the two of us, and kept going on about how amazing I looked and how proud he was. But sitting there, looking at him in his same old hoodie, eating the same takeout we'd been ordering for years, I couldn't help but think about all the men who'd been noticing me lately. Men who were taller, more successful, more ambitious. Men who looked like they belonged with the new version of me. Eric was still treating me like I was the same girl who said yes to his proposal. But I wasn't. I was better now, and I deserved better too. The grocery store became my favorite place because that's where I met this guy who was absolutely gorgeous. Tall, probably 6'2", with this incredible smile and designer everything. He complimented my tattoo and asked for my number right there by the organic produce. I could see him looking at my engagement ring, but he asked anyway. That's confidence. That's what a real man does when he sees something he wants. Of course, I told Eric about it that night because I'm not a liar. I mentioned how this really attractive guy had hit on me at the store, and Eric got all weird about it. Started asking these annoying questions like, what did the guy look like? What did he say exactly? Did I give him my number? When I said no, he seemed relieved, but then he made this comment about how my ring should be protection enough from other guys. Protection like I needed protecting from better options. That really annoyed me. Then there was this personal trainer at my gym. Abs you could grate cheese on, always asking if I needed help with my form. He'd stand just a little too close when he was showing me exercises, and honestly, I didn't mind. Eric never worked out with me anyway, always made excuses about being tired after work. This trainer would text me workout tips and motivational quotes, and I started looking forward to those messages way more than Eric's boring, "How was your day?" texts. At work, things got interesting too. Our company hired this new guy for management training. Fresh out of his MBA, expensive watch, drove a BMW. He started eating lunch at my table, and we'd talk about his plans to move up in the company, maybe start his own business someday. He had ambition, real plans for his future. Meanwhile, Eric had been doing the same job for 3 years with no plans to advance anywhere. When I'd bring up this new guy's success stories at dinner, Eric would just grunt and change the subject. The more attention I got, the more I realized what I'd been missing all these years. I started really looking at Eric, really seeing him. His receding hairline that he tried to hide with that stupid baseball cap, his gut that hung over his belt even though he kept promising to start working out next week, the way he'd rather play video games than take me anywhere nice, his complete lack of ambition or drive to be anything more than exactly what he already was. I wasn't being mean. I was being realistic. I'd changed. I'd improved myself. I'd become someone worth wanting. Shouldn't my partner have done the same? One night, after a few glasses of wine, I told Eric about some of the dreams I'd been having. Nothing graphic. Just that sometimes I dream about being with someone more successful, someone who could give me the life I deserve now, someone taller, more financially stable, someone who looked like they belonged with the new me. I thought he'd understand. Maybe it would motivate him to step up his game. Instead, he got all hurt and started asking if I wanted to break up. I had to calm him down and explain that I loved him, but was it so wrong to wonder what else was out there? After that conversation, Eric started acting all insecure and clingy, which honestly just pushed me further away. He'd text me constantly when I was at the gym, asking when I'd be home. He started suggesting we eat dinner together every night, instead of our usual routine where I'd grab something healthy and he'd order whatever. It felt suffocating, like he was trying to keep me from enjoying my new life. The worst part was how he'd get all wounded whenever I mentioned getting attention from other men. Like, I wasn't bragging or trying to hurt him. I was sharing my day like couples are supposed to do. But every time I'd mention my trainer helping me with deadlifts or my coworker asking about my weekend plans, Eric would get this pathetic look on his face. He started making these passive-aggressive comments about how I seemed different and how he missed the old me. The old me. The old me was miserable and invisible. Why would anyone miss that? I started spending more time at the gym, partly because I loved my new routine, but partly because Eric's neediness was driving me crazy. My trainer and I would grab protein smoothies after our workouts, and he'd tell me about his weekend plans: hiking, beach volleyball, actual active things. Meanwhile, Eric's idea of a perfect weekend was ordering Chinese food and binge watching Netflix. The contrast was getting harder to ignore. At work, my coworkers started inviting me to after-work networking events, professional development stuff that could actually help my career. When I'd mention these to Eric, he'd ask why he couldn't come too, completely missing the point that these were work functions where I was trying to build my professional image. He didn't understand that the new me needed to be around people who matched my ambition and drive. Then Eric started doing this thing where he'd surprise me with my old favorite foods: pizza, ice cream, those gross, loaded nachos we used to share. When I'd politely decline because I was maintaining my new lifestyle, he'd get all hurt and ask if we could at least share them like old times. It was like he wanted me to go backward, to become that overweight, invisible girl again, because that version of me was easier for him to handle. The breaking point came when I got invited to my coworker's housewarming party. It was going to be all the young professionals from our office and their partners. I was excited to go, to be seen as part of that crowd. But when I told Eric about it, he immediately started complaining. He said he wouldn't know anyone there, that it would be awkward, that we should just stay home and watch a movie instead. When I insisted we were going, he spent the entire party sulking in the corner, barely talking to anyone. Meanwhile, I was having amazing conversations with successful people about career goals and travel plans. My coworker introduced me as his brilliant colleague, and I felt seen in a way I never did when Eric introduced me as just his fiancé. On the drive home, Eric was quiet until he finally exploded about how I'd ignored him all night and how I seemed more interested in impressing my coworkers than spending time with him. I tried to explain that networking was important for my career, but he just didn't get it. He kept saying things like, "You used to care about us, and I don't know who you are anymore." That's when I realized the real problem. Eric was holding me back. He was comfortable with the old version of me because it meant he didn't have to grow or change or challenge himself. My transformation was threatening to him because it highlighted how stagnant he'd become. Things between Eric and me were getting tense, and honestly, I was getting tired of pretending everything was fine. I felt like I was living a double life, being this new, confident version of myself everywhere except at home, where Eric expected me to be the same girl who'd said yes to his mediocre proposal. The whole thing came to a head on a Saturday night when we'd been drinking wine and watching some stupid action movie he'd picked. I was feeling relaxed, maybe too relaxed, and Eric kept going on about wedding planning. He wanted to book this basic venue near his parents' house. Nothing special, just convenient. He was talking about having his cousin's band play and getting flowers from the wholesale club to save money for the honeymoon. A honeymoon to Florida, not even somewhere exotic. Just Florida because he had some timeshare points. Sitting there listening to him plan this bargain basement wedding, I couldn't help thinking about the kind of wedding my coworker would throw, or my trainer, or even that guy from the grocery store. These were men who understood that special occasions deserved special treatment, men who wouldn't suggest wholesale flowers for the most important day of a woman's life. The wine was making me honest, maybe too honest. I started telling Eric about these dreams I'd been having, not the sanitized version I'd shared before, but the real ones. Dreams about being with someone who could give me the life I deserved now. Someone with a corner office instead of a cubicle. Someone who wore suits instead of graphic t-shirts. Someone tall and successful who looked like he belonged with the new me. I told him about that guy asking for my number, about how my trainer always made time to help me at the gym, about how my coworker treated me like an equal, instead of some fragile thing that might break. Eric just stared at me like he was trying to process what I was saying. Then he asked if I wanted to call off the engagement. Just like that. Not how can we fix this or what do you need from me? Straight to giving up. I had to explain that I didn't want to break up, but was it really so terrible that I sometimes wondered what else was out there? Was it wrong to want a partner who matched my new standards? I'd worked so hard to become someone better, someone worthy of more, and he was acting like that was a bad thing. He got all quiet and weird after that. Wouldn't even look at me. I tried to lighten the mood by saying we should probably head to bed, but he said he needed to think. Think about what? About whether he was going to step up and become the man I deserved, or keep being this basic, unambitious guy who wanted to marry me at some community center with grocery store flowers. The next morning, Eric was different. Cold, distant. He barely said good morning, just poured his coffee and started scrolling through his phone. When I tried to talk to him about the night before, he said we'd talk later and left for work without kissing me goodbye. That had never happened before in 9 years. All day at work, I kept thinking about our conversation. Maybe I'd been too honest. But isn't honesty what relationships are supposed to be built on? I wasn't asking him to be someone completely different. I was asking him to be better. to match my energy, to show me that he understood I deserved more than the bare minimum. My coworker noticed I seemed off and asked if everything was okay. When I mentioned having relationship issues, he suggested we grab coffee after work to talk. He was such a good listener, asking thoughtful questions and actually caring about my feelings instead of just getting defensive like Eric always did. Eric was still acting weird when I got home from coffee with my coworker. He'd made dinner, which was unusual since I usually handled meals now that I was focused on eating clean. He'd even cleaned the apartment, which honestly made me suspicious because Eric only cleaned when something was seriously wrong. During dinner, he kept staring at me with this intense look I couldn't read. Finally, he put down his fork and said we needed to talk about what I'd said the night before. Here we go. I thought he was either going to promise to change and step up, or he was going to have some big emotional breakdown about his feelings being hurt. What I wasn't expecting was for him to be completely calm and direct. He said he'd been thinking about everything I'd told him, about my dreams, about the other men, about deserving better, and he'd come to a decision. He said he was calling off the wedding, not postponing it, not pausing to work on things, canceling it completely. I literally laughed because I thought he was being dramatic. Eric doesn't make big declarations like that. He's the guy who takes 3 weeks to decide what to order at restaurants, but he wasn't laughing. He said he'd spent the day realizing that I was right. I did deserve better than him, but he also deserved better than someone who fantasized about other men and constantly made him feel inadequate. He said he loved me, had loved me for 9 years exactly as I was, but he couldn't love someone who saw him as a placeholder until something better came along. I tried to explain that he was misunderstanding everything. I wasn't looking for someone else. I was trying to motivate him to be better for us. All those comments about other men, all my honesty about wanting more, it was supposed to inspire him to step up his game. Instead, he was giving up without even trying. But Eric just shook his head and said he was tired of feeling like he was auditioning for my approval every day. He said the woman he'd proposed to would never have told him she dreamed about other men or made him feel like he wasn't good enough. That woman had loved him back then, but this new version of me only loved the idea of who he could become if he completely changed everything about himself. The worst part was how he said it. Not angry or emotional, just tired, like he'd already grieved the relationship and moved on. He said he'd stay at his friend's place for a few days while we figured out the logistics of separating our lives. 9 years together, and he was ready to throw it all away because I'd been honest about my feelings. I asked him if this was really what he wanted, if he was seriously going to let his ego ruin our entire relationship. He said it wasn't about his ego. It was about self-respect. He said he deserved to be with someone who chose him enthusiastically every day, not someone who settled for him while shopping around for better options. Before he left, he took off his ring and set it on the kitchen counter next to mine. He said he hoped I found everything I was looking for and that whoever ended up with me would be enough for the person I'd become. Then he just left. No big fight, no dramatic scene. Just packed a bag and walked out like our 9 years together meant nothing to him. I sat there staring at those 2 rings on the counter, completely shocked that he'd actually gone through with it. All I'd done was be honest about my feelings and my growth as a person. All I'd wanted was for him to grow, too, to become someone worthy of the new me. Instead, he'd rather throw everything away than even try. The first few weeks after Eric left were honestly liberating. I didn't have to deal with his constant neediness or his passive-aggressive comments about how I'd changed. I could go to the gym without getting 20 texts asking when I'd be home. I could grab drinks with my coworker after work without having to explain myself to anyone. For the first time in years, I felt completely free to be the new version of myself without someone constantly trying to pull me backward. I threw myself into my new life. My coworker and I started hanging out more, and he introduced me to his circle of young professionals. These were people who understood ambition, who talked about goals and success instead of just complaining about their jobs. My trainer and I started meeting for weekend hikes, and he helped me set up a whole new fitness routine. Even that guy from the grocery store reached out. Apparently, he'd gotten my number from a mutual friend, and we went to this amazing restaurant downtown. For a few months, I felt vindicated. This was exactly what I'd been missing with Eric. These men treated me like I deserved to be treated, took me places Eric never would have thought to go, had conversations about things that mattered. But then things started getting weird. My coworker, who'd seemed so interested in me as a person, started making it clear he expected our friendship to become physical. When I mentioned I was still technically engaged and processing my separation, he basically said I needed to figure out what I wanted because he wasn't interested in playing games. My trainer turned out to be seeing 3 other women from the gym, and when I brought up wanting something more serious, he laughed and said he thought I understood he wasn't the relationship type. The grocery store guy was the worst. After 2 expensive dinners, he assumed I owed him something and got aggressive when I said I wasn't ready for that level of intimacy. It hit me that none of these men were actually interested in me as a person. They'd seen an attractive woman who was clearly having relationship problems and figured I was easy prey. The confident, successful, ambitious men I'd been so impressed by were just looking for a hookup with someone they saw as vulnerable and available. Meanwhile, I started hearing things about Eric through mutual friends. He'd gotten a promotion at work. Apparently, he'd been working toward it for months, but never mentioned it to me. He'd started going to therapy and working out. Our friend Sarah posted pictures of him at some hiking trip, and he looked different, healthier, happier, more confident. He was becoming the person I'd wanted him to be, just without me. The worst part came 6 months later when I ran into him at the store. He was with someone, a woman I didn't recognize. Pretty, but not dramatically so, probably around my old size. She was laughing at something he'd said, looking at him like he was the most interesting person in the world, the way I used to look at him back when I appreciated what I had instead of constantly wanting more. He saw me and nodded politely, but didn't come over to talk, just continued shopping with this woman who clearly adored him exactly as he was. That's when it really hit me. Eric hadn't been the problem. I had been. I'd taken a man who loved me unconditionally and made him feel worthless because he didn't fit some fantasy I'd built in my head. I'd traded someone real for the illusion of something better. And now I was alone with my perfect body and my empty apartment and my dating apps full of men who saw me as nothing more than a temporary distraction. The cruel irony is that I finally have the attention I always wanted, but it's all surface level. No one wants to know the real me anymore. They just want the package I've wrapped myself in. Eric knew me when I was nobody special and loved me anyway. Now I'm supposedly somebody special and no one loves me at all. But whatever. I'm not going to sit here and blame myself for wanting better. Eric could have stepped up, could have become the man I needed him to be. Instead, he chose to walk away and find someone who'd settle for his mediocrity. That's his loss, not mine. If this confession kept you hooked, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We share powerful true stories every day that explore the complex realities of life.